Please, no.
I carried a promise hidden in my hand, dreaming we'd forever stand. One open door, one shattered heart. Everything we built fell apart. You broke my trust, you broke my soul, left me standing in the cold. But even in the darkest night, the truth will bring me back to life.
The deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people you trust the most. Mason Calloway stood outside the office of Langford Global Holdings' powerful CEO, a small black velvet ring box clutched tightly in his hand. After 5 years of loving Serena Whitfield, tonight was the night he had dreamed about for months. He was finally going to ask her to marry him. A smile spread across his face as he reached for the office door. Then, he heard a woman's laughter. His smile faded. His heart began to pound. For a brief moment, he told himself he was imagining things. Slowly, he pushed the door open. The moment the door swung wide, his entire world fell apart. Standing before him was Victor Langford, his billionaire boss. His arm was wrapped around Serena, the woman Mason had planned to spend the rest of his life with. Serena turned. Their eyes met. The color drained from her face. The engagement ring slipped from Mason's trembling fingers and struck the polished marble floor. The sound echoed through the silent office. Victor looked directly at Mason. A slow smile spread across his face. Then he calmly said, "You're too late." Mason thought he had just lost the woman he loved. He had no idea what was coming next. Welcome to Cognora, where every story uncovers the hidden truths of human nature, and every ending leaves a lesson worth remembering. If you enjoy powerful, emotional stories like this one, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Your support helps us bring you more unforgettable stories every week. And before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to see which part of the world you're joining us from. Now, let's begin today's incredible story. Every morning, Mason Calloway woke up believing he was one of the luckiest men alive. He had a career he had earned through hard work, a mother he loved with all his heart, a best friend who had never let him down, and a woman he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with. At 32, Mason wasn't rich. He didn't drive an expensive sports car or live in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the city. Instead, he rented a modest apartment just a few blocks from Langford Global Holdings, where he worked as a financial analyst. His life was simple, but it was honest, and that was enough for him. Every morning, he greeted the security guards by name, thanked the janitors who kept the building spotless, and treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were executives or interns. People trusted Mason because he never pretended to be someone he wasn't. To him, character was worth more than money. No matter how demanding work became, there was one place he never failed to visit after leaving the office: his mother's house. Grace Calloway had raised Mason alone after losing her husband several years earlier. Although she insisted she could manage on her own, Mason always stopped by to help with the little things. He repaired loose cabinet doors, carried groceries inside, changed light bulbs, and shared dinner with her whenever he could. Watching her son move around the house always brought a smile to Grace's face. "You work all day," she said softly one evening. "You don't have to keep worrying about me." Mason smiled as he placed a cup of tea in front of her. "I'll always worry about you, Mom." Grace reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. "Then promise me something." "What is it?" "When you marry Serena, don't spend all your time looking after me." Mason laughed. "I don't think Serena would let me." Almost as if she had heard her name, Mason's phone began to ring. "Serena," he answered with a smile. "Hi, beautiful. I just wanted to check on your mom," Serena said warmly. "Is she behaving herself today?" Grace laughed loudly from across the table. "I'm sitting right here, young lady." "I know," Serena replied, laughing. "That's why I asked." The three of them spent several minutes talking together. Grace adored Serena. She often told Mason that she couldn't have chosen a kinder woman if she had tried. After ending the call, Grace smiled knowingly. Don't keep that sweet girl waiting forever. Mason grinned but said nothing. Later that afternoon, he met his best friend, Noah Bennett, at their favorite coffee shop. Noah took one look at Mason's face and chuckled. That smile tells me you're hiding something. Without saying a word, Mason reached into his jacket pocket and carefully placed a small black velvet ring box on the table. Noah's eyes widened. You finally bought it. Mason nodded. It took months of saving. Noah slowly opened the box. Inside rested a beautiful diamond engagement ring. So, when's the big moment? Mason looked at the ring with quiet excitement. Tonight. Noah smiled from ear to ear. It's about time. You've loved that woman for 5 years. I know. And after tonight? Mason closed the ring box carefully. Hopefully I'll be planning a wedding. The two friends laughed as they left the cafe and walked back toward Langford Global Holdings. For Mason, life couldn't have felt more complete. He had a job he loved, a mother who believed in him, a best friend he trusted like a brother. And in his pocket rested the ring that represented every dream he had for the future. As he gently slipped the ring box back into his jacket, he couldn't help but smile. He believed he was walking toward the happiest evening of his life. He had no reason to think otherwise. Langford Global Holdings wasn't just another corporation. It was one of the most powerful business empires in the country. Its magnificent glass headquarters dominated the city's skyline, a symbol of wealth, ambition, and influence. Every day, Fortune 500 executives, government officials, and international investors walked through its towering entrance, hoping to earn the attention of the man who had built the empire from the ground up. At the center of that empire stood one man, Victor Langford. To the world, he was the definition of success, a self-made billionaire, a visionary entrepreneur, a respected philanthropist whose charitable foundation donated millions to hospitals, schools, and community projects every year. Business magazines praised his leadership. Investors admired his instincts. Employees considered him an inspiration. But there was another side to Victor that very few people ever saw. Victor Langford had built his empire by seeing opportunities where everyone else saw limits. He rarely made mistakes, and he never ignored anything that caught his attention. That morning, Victor arrived at headquarters exactly as he always did. The revolving doors opened. Conversations faded. Executives instinctively stepped aside. Assistants greeted him respectfully. Security officers nodded as he passed. Without saying a word, Victor walked confidently through the marble lobby, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his calm expression commanding attention without demanding it. From the executive floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. It was a view that reminded him every morning how far he had come. Elsewhere in the building, employees hurried through the corridors preparing for an important board meeting. Among them was Serena Whitfield. As she walked toward the conference room carrying several presentation folders, a nervous intern accidentally dropped a stack of files across the hallway. Without hesitation, Serena knelt to help gather every document. "It's okay," she said with a reassuring smile. "We've all had days like this." The young intern smiled with relief. Only then did Victor notice her. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Her kindness spoke for itself. Victor watched her for a brief moment before turning to his executive assistant. "Who is she?" "Serena Whitfield, sir," the assistant replied. "She works in corporate communications." Victor gave a slight nod. Then he continued toward the boardroom, but he remembered the name. Minutes later, the quarterly executive meeting began. Department heads presented reports one after another until it was the finance department's turn. Mason Calloway stood and calmly walked to the front of the room. With confidence and remarkable clarity, he explained the company's financial performance, answered difficult questions without hesitation, and pointed out several opportunities for future growth that even senior executives had overlooked. As he finished speaking, the boardroom became unusually quiet. Several executives exchanged impressed glances. Victor slowly closed the report in front of him. Most people saw an intelligent young financial analyst with enormous potential. Victor saw something else. A man who paid attention to details, a man who wasn't afraid to ask difficult questions, a man who could one day become either one of the company's greatest assets or its greatest problem. The meeting finally came to an end. Employees gathered their files and quietly left the boardroom. Mason and Serena exchanged warm smiles as they passed each other in the hallway before continuing in different directions. Neither of them noticed Victor standing silently behind the glass wall of his office, watching them disappear into the busy corridors. But Victor noticed everything. For Mason Calloway, numbers told stories. Every payment left a trail. Every invoice had a purpose, and every figure was expected to make sense. That was why his colleagues trusted him with some of the company's most sensitive financial reviews. A few days after the quarterly board meeting, Mason was assigned to conduct a routine internal audit of several international transactions. At first, everything appeared normal. Invoices matched purchase orders. Payments had been approved. Vendor records looked complete. But as Mason continued reviewing the files, something caught his attention. A series of transactions seemed unusually familiar. On their own, they looked routine. Together, they formed a pattern he couldn't ignore. Mason frowned. He opened another file, then another, and another. The names of the consulting companies were different, yet the payment schedules looked remarkably similar. Several companies shared the same contact information. Others had almost no corporate history. Mason leaned back in his chair. "That's strange," he whispered. He wasn't accusing anyone of wrongdoing. He simply wanted to understand what he was seeing. Believing there had been an administrative oversight, Mason contacted the accounts department and politely requested additional supporting documents. Within hours, the files arrived at his desk. Instead of answering his questions, they raised even more. Some contracts carried signatures that looked unusually alike. Several approval dates didn't match the dates the payments had been processed. A few invoices appeared to have been created long after the transactions had already taken place. The deeper Mason looked, the more uneasy he became. He carefully documented every observation and organized the records so they could be reviewed more easily. His goal wasn't to expose anyone. He simply wanted the company's financial records to be accurate. Later that afternoon, Mason requested a brief meeting with his department manager. "I've noticed a few transactions I'd like to verify before we finalize the audit," he explained. "There are some details that don't seem to line up." His manager accepted the report with little concern. "I'll send this to the executive office." Mason nodded. Satisfied that he had done his job, he returned to his desk and continued working. He had no idea that his report had just reached Victor Langford. Victor read every page without saying a word. When he reached Mason's observations, his expression remained perfectly calm. He quietly closed the file. Then he pressed the intercom button. "Have the chief financial officer meet me in my office immediately." A few minutes later, the chief financial officer entered the office. Victor slid the audit report across the desk. The executive studied the pages in silence. The confidence on his face slowly disappeared. Neither man spoke. The silence was heavier than words. Finally, Victor broke it. "How much does Mason Calloway know?" "I don't believe he knows anything," the chief financial officer answered carefully. "He's simply asking questions." Victor walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city below. For several moments, he said nothing. Then, without turning around, he spoke. "Some questions are never meant to be asked." The office fell silent once again. Victor returned to his desk. He closed the file, placed it neatly in front of him, and folded his hands. His decision had already been made. Victor Langford was not a man who believed in coincidences. He believed people revealed themselves when they were given the opportunity to choose. And he intended to give Serena Whitfield that opportunity. The following morning, Serena was surprised when she received a message from the executive office. "The CEO would like to see you." She read the message twice. Surely there had been some mistake. Employees at her level rarely met with Victor Langford unless they had done something exceptionally well or exceptionally wrong. Trying to remain calm, Serena made her way to the executive floor. The doors opened to an office unlike anything she had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Original works of art decorated the walls. Every piece of furniture reflected quiet luxury. Victor stood beside the window with his hands behind his back. Without turning around, he said, "Miss Whitfield, thank you for coming." Serena smiled politely. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Victor finally turned. "I've been hearing good things about you." She looked surprised. "I've only been doing my job." "Sometimes," Victor replied with a faint smile, "doing your job better than everyone else gets noticed." He invited her to sit. Their conversation began with work. He asked about her career goals, her education, her ambitions, the kind of future she imagined for herself. At first, Serena answered cautiously, but Victor had a way of making people feel comfortable. Within minutes, she found herself speaking openly. "I've always wanted more," she admitted quietly. "I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to give my family a better life." Victor listened without interrupting. Then he asked, "And can your current salary give you those things?" Serena hesitated. "No." Victor nodded as though he had expected the answer. "Talent deserves opportunity." He opened a folder on his desk. Inside was an offer, a promotion, a significant salary increase, an executive development program that included international travel and direct access to senior leadership. Serena stared at the documents. I don't understand. Victor smiled. I reward potential. She looked at the offer again. Everything she had dreamed about seemed to be sitting in front of her. Victor watched her carefully. There is an entire world waiting beyond the life you've settled for. His words lingered in her mind. Before she left, Victor spoke one final time. Think about the kind of future you really want. You don't have to answer today. Serena quietly thanked him and walked out of the office carrying the folder against her chest. The elevator doors closed. She looked down at the promotion letter once more. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished metal doors. For the first time in years, she found herself wondering whether love was enough. Far above the city, Victor remained standing by the window. A faint smile crossed his face. The trap had not been sprung. It had simply been opened. And he knew that temptation, given enough time, could be far more powerful than force. The engagement ring had barely left Mason's pocket all day. Every chance he got, he reached inside his jacket just to make sure it was still there. Tonight was the night. He had reserved a table at Serena's favorite restaurant overlooking the river. Fresh flowers had already been delivered. A violinist was waiting to play their favorite song. All that remained was to pick Serena up from the office. For the first time in months, Mason allowed himself to believe the future had finally arrived. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. When the doors opened, the hallway was unusually quiet. Most of the employees had already gone home. Only a few office lights were still glowing. Mason walked toward Victor Langford's office, believing Serena was still helping prepare documents for an executive meeting. It wasn't unusual. She often stayed behind whenever an important project needed extra attention. As he approached the office, he heard laughter. It was soft, warm, familiar. Serena's laughter. A smile crossed Mason's face. He tightened his grip on the small black velvet ring box. His heart beat faster with excitement. Without knocking, he gently pushed the office door open. Time stood still. Victor Langford stood only a few steps away. His arm rested comfortably around Serena's waist. She was smiling. The same gentle smile Mason had fallen in love with 5 years earlier. For one long, unbearable moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Serena slowly turned toward the doorway. The smile vanished from her face. Mason. His name escaped her lips almost as a whisper. The black velvet ring box slipped from Mason's trembling fingers. It struck the polished marble floor. The lid sprang open. The diamond ring rolled slowly across the office. Before coming to rest beneath Victor's desk, the sound echoed through the silent room. Mason stared at Serena. His lips parted, but no words came. 5 years. 5 years of memories rushed through his mind. Every promise they had made, every dream they had shared, every future they had planned together. Victor never looked away. The silence stretched between them until it became unbearable. Only then did he speak. You're too late. Let the words cut deeper than any blade ever could. Mason felt as though the air had been ripped from his lungs. The woman he loved, the future he had dreamed about, the life he believed was waiting for him. All of it collapsed in a single moment. Mason wanted to ask 1,000 questions. He couldn't ask a single one. He turned and walked away. Behind him, the diamond caught the light from Victor's office. But Mason never looked back. The morning after discovering Serena in Victor Langford's office, Mason barely recognized the man staring back at him in the mirror. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Serena standing beside Victor. He replayed the moment over and over, searching for an explanation that never came. But no matter how badly his heart hurt, he knew he couldn't allow his personal life to interfere with his responsibilities. He reported to work as he always did. The atmosphere inside Langford Global Holdings felt different. Conversations stopped as he walked past. People glanced at him before quickly looking away. Something was wrong. When Mason reached his desk, a message was already waiting. Executive boardroom. Immediately. Confused, he made his way upstairs. Every senior executive was already seated. Victor Langford stood at the head of the table. His expression revealed nothing. Mr. Calloway, Victor said calmly, please take a seat. Mason obeyed. Without another word, Victor pressed a button on the conference room screen. A series of financial records appeared. Bank transfers, approval forms, authorization logs, digital signatures. Victor looked around the room before speaking. Our internal investigation has uncovered serious financial irregularities. The room fell silent. Victor continued. The transactions in question were approved using the credentials assigned to Mr. Mason Calloway. Mason frowned. That's impossible. Victor calmly placed a thick file in front of him. Is that your signature? Mason looked down. It looked exactly like his, but it wasn't. He quickly turned the pages. Every document appeared authentic. Every approval carried his name. Every digital authorization matched his employee credentials. This has been altered, Mason said firmly. These records weren't like this when I reviewed them. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. Victor remained perfectly composed. So you're suggesting someone fabricated every document in this investigation? Yes, Mason replied without hesitation. I reported irregular transactions days ago. Someone changed the records after I submitted my audit. Victor folded his hands. That's a very serious accusation. It also happens to be the only explanation. The room became uncomfortably quiet. Then Victor gave a slow nod. I'll allow the authorities to determine the truth. The conference room doors opened. 2 security officers stepped inside. Mason looked around the room in disbelief. No one spoke. No one defended him. Victor's voice remained calm. Escort Mr. Calloway from the building while the investigation continues. The walk through the company felt endless. Employees watched in stunned silence as security escorted Mason through the marble lobby. Some whispered. Others simply stared. The man everyone had trusted only yesterday now looked like a criminal. By the end of the afternoon, news spread throughout Langford Global Holdings that millions of dollars could not be accounted for. The company immediately contacted the police. The case was assigned to Detective Logan Pierce, one of the city's most respected financial crime investigators. Logan began reviewing the evidence. The financial records, the authorization logs, the digital signatures. Every trail appeared to lead to one person, Mason Calloway. As part of the investigation, Serena Whitfield was also interviewed. She wanted to believe Mason was innocent. She truly did. But the evidence seemed impossible to ignore. Then Victor quietly told her, I wanted to believe Mason was innocent too. His voice carried disappointment rather than anger. But the evidence speaks for itself. Serena lowered her eyes. Her heart refused to accept it. Her mind struggled to reject it. For the first time in 5 years, she looked at Mason, not with certainty, but with doubt. And for Victor Langford, that was exactly where he wanted everyone to be. The arrest came just before sunrise. A firm knock echoed through the quiet apartment building. Mason Calloway opened the door to find Detective Logan Pierce standing outside with 4 uniformed officers. Logan's expression was calm and professional. Mr. Mason Calloway, he said quietly, you are under arrest on suspicion of financial fraud, embezzlement, and corporate theft. Grace Calloway stepped into the hallway, still wearing her robe. She looked from the officers to her son, completely confused. What is happening? There has to be some mistake. Mason looked at Detective Logan. I didn't steal anything. Logan held his gaze. Then I hope the truth comes out. One of the officers stepped forward. The handcuffs clicked shut around Mason's wrists. Grace burst into tears. Mason. He turned toward her and forced a reassuring smile. It's going to be okay, Mom. I didn't do this. But deep inside, even he wasn't sure how. As the officers escorted him outside, curtains shifted throughout the neighborhood. Front doors opened. Whispers spread from one house to another. By the time the police vehicle pulled away, everyone on the street knew something terrible had happened. Within hours, television stations and online news platforms were carrying the same headline. A respected financial analyst had been arrested for allegedly stealing millions from Langford Global Holdings. The story spread rapidly across the city. Over the following weeks, investigators continued gathering evidence while prosecutors prepared their case. Every new report portrayed Mason as the mastermind behind a carefully planned financial crime. His request for bail was denied. He remained in custody while awaiting trial. Several weeks later, the courtroom was filled long before the hearing began. Journalists occupied the front rows. Employees from Langford Global watched quietly from the gallery. Victor Langford entered without saying a word. His confidence never wavered. Serena Whitfield followed shortly afterward. She hadn't spoken to Mason since his arrest. She wanted to believe Mason. But every headline, every report, every document she had been shown made that belief impossible to hold on to. Unable to afford an experienced corporate defense attorney, Mason relied on a court-appointed lawyer. The attorney prepared as thoroughly as he could, but the prosecution's case appeared overwhelming. Witness after witness took the stand. Financial experts explained complex money transfers. Digital forensic analysts authenticated electronic records. Company executives described how internal financial controls had allegedly been bypassed. Then came the documents. Audit reports, electronic approvals, authorization logs, bank transfer records. Every signature appeared authentic. Every timestamp matched. Every record pointed directly at Mason. When the prosecution rested its case, the courtroom fell silent. It was finally Mason's turn. He walked slowly to the witness stand. He looked toward the jury. "I discovered irregularities during an internal audit," he said. "I reported those irregularities because I believed it was the right thing to do. Someone changed those records after I submitted my report." The prosecutor rose. "Mr. Calloway, do you have any evidence proving those records were altered?" Mason hesitated. "No." "Can you identify the person responsible?" "No." "Can you produce a witness who saw these alleged alterations?" Again, no. The silence inside the courtroom became almost unbearable. Mason was telling the truth, but without evidence. The truth sounded like nothing more than a desperate claim. After several days of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, the courtroom doors opened. Everyone rose as the judge entered. The foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant." Mason held his breath. "Guilty." Grace lowered her head and wept quietly. Serena closed her eyes. She wanted to believe Mason, but the evidence had become impossible to ignore. Victor Langford remained perfectly still. His face revealed nothing. The judge adjusted his glasses before speaking. "Mr. Mason Calloway, having been found guilty on all counts, this court hereby sentences you to 3 years in state prison." The gavel struck. Its echo filled the courtroom. Court officers immediately approached Mason. Grace reached toward her son. "Mason!" An officer gently held her back. She broke down in tears. Mason turned to look at her one last time. Then he looked toward Serena. She couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. Finally, his gaze settled on Victor Langford. Victor returned the stare. His expression never changed. Without another glance back, Mason was escorted from the courtroom. Several hours later, after completing processing, fingerprinting, photographs, a medical screening, and the required paperwork, a prison transport bus rolled through the towering steel gates of Blackwood State Prison. Mason sat silently beside the window. The gates slowly closed behind the bus with a heavy metallic roar. The sound echoed across the prison yard. For the first time in his life, the steel gates closed behind Mason Calloway. His old life was over. Several hours later, after completing processing, fingerprinting, photographs, a medical screening, and the required paperwork, a prison transport bus rolled through the towering steel gates of Blackwood State Prison. Mason sat silently beside the window. The steel gates slowly closed behind the bus with a heavy metallic roar. The sound echoed across the prison yard. For the first time in his life, the steel gates closed behind Mason Calloway. His old life was over. Miles away, Victor Langford stood inside his luxurious corner office overlooking the city skyline. He watched the evening news playing silently on a large television. The headline read, "Mason Calloway sentenced to 3 years for corporate fraud." Victor picked up a crystal glass and took a slow sip. A faint smile crossed his face. He believed the past had been buried forever. Inside the prison bus, Mason looked through the narrow window as the gates disappeared behind him. His hands slowly tightened into fists. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "This isn't over. I'll prove the truth." Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. We truly appreciate your time and support. If this episode kept you on the edge of your seat, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Cognora for more powerful stories that uncover the hidden truths of human nature. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified the moment episode 2 is released. Until then, stay kind, stay wise, and remember, true character is revealed not by wealth or status, but by the choices we make when no one is watching. Thank you for being part of the Cognora family. We'll see you in episode 2.